Brian Watson was born in 1961. He grew up in South Boston, Massachusetts. When Brian was 23 years old, people noticed he was gone. His mom got really worried when he didn't come home or call anyone in the family for many days. It was strange for him to be so quiet, and she got more scared as each day went by with no clue about where he was or who he was with before he disappeared. She couldn't just sit around being scared, so his mom did something about it and told the police her son was missing. She filled out the report on July 28, 1984, which was about 11 to 12 days after the last time anyone saw Brian. This was the start of trying to figure out why he was gone and if something bad had happened to him. After she filed the report, the police started looking into what had happened to Brian. Even though the case was listed as a missing grown-up, the weird things about how he disappeared made people worry early on. The fact that he hadn't talked to anyone and suddenly changed his normal routine made it seem like someone might have hurt him. The detectives started by looking at the information Brian's family told them, hoping to find any clue about where to look next. They collected whatever little information they could find, looking at the last times people saw him and anything unusual he had done lately. Since nobody could explain why he was gone, every tiny clue mattered a lot. The police also looked into the people Brian knew, talking to people who had been around him before he went missing. They checked the places he usually went to in South Boston, hoping someone remembered seeing him in the days before he disappeared. These familiar spots were the first places they looked. 2 months after he went missing, on September 16th, something big happened when someone driving along Interstate 93 south near Manchester, New Hampshire, saw something weird off the road. About 40 feet away from the road, the driver found a body. What they saw made them call the police right away, and the police started trying to figure out who the person was and what happened. When the police looked at the body, they were very careful trying to figure out who it was. They used dental records to make a positive match, and the results showed that the body was Brian Watson. This answer not only ended the missing person part of the case, but also completely changed what the case was about because now the detectives had to solve a crime that needed more answers. The medical examiner later said that Brian had been shot. Even though they didn't tell everyone all the details about what happened, the decision showed that his death had been done on purpose. This discovery brought up new questions about how Brian ended up in New Hampshire and who did this. Because of what the medical examiner said, a big investigation started with different groups working together. Many police departments got involved, including the New Hampshire State Police, Manchester Police Department, Boston Police Department, and the federal police. Working together like this showed how serious the case was and how hard it was to find answers that crossed state borders and involved different police areas. Over the years, the detectives kept looking at evidence, asking people questions, and searching for any detail that could show what had happened to Brian. The work went on for a really long time, showing how much the police wanted to understand what happened that led to his death. Even as years went by, the case stayed open and unsolved. After 2.5 decades went by, around 2009, the detectives found a big clue that looked promising. Even though this discovery seemed like progress, the information they found wasn't strong enough to charge anyone with the crime. The clue, even though it was important, wasn't good enough to officially accuse someone of being the bad guy, leaving the case still without a clear answer and the search for truth still going. The case finally got a clearer path when the detectives connected the case to an argument about illegal drugs linked to Whitey Bulger. In that situation, the police figured out that Michael Lewis and another person had been the ones who got rid of Brian's body. This connection changed the focus of the long investigation and gave the detectives a clearer direction to follow. In later years, a person the lawyers called Witness 2 came forward with new information. According to this witness, Lewis had talked about doing the act several times. Even though the statements by themselves weren't enough to build a full case, they gave the police something to work with. The detectives hadn't been able to prove this before, and it made them look more closely at the evidence around it. The police worked to check if the witness's story matched up with other stuff they had collected over the years. Their review backed up what the witness said, making the case stronger and giving the detectives enough confidence to take formal legal steps. This proof played a big part in moving forward a case that had been stuck for almost 40 years. On May 27, 2022, a grand jury charged Michael Lewis with first-degree murder. He was 61 years old then and still lived in South Boston. The charges said that he was the one who killed Brian. On or about July 16th or 17th of 1984, Lewis and another man, who were both selling drugs in South Boston, were driving around South Boston looking for another drug dealer. Their goal was to stop that dealer from selling drugs in South Boston. While they were looking for the dealer, Lewis and the second man ran into Brian Watson. The second man asked Brian to take them to the dealer. Brian said okay. He got in the car and sat in the back seat. While the three men drove around South Boston, Lewis suddenly turned around, shot, and killed Brian. The two of them then drove into New Hampshire and left Brian's body off I-93 South in Manchester. In 2025, Lewis went through the court process. During the time when Brian's family could speak, they talked about a loving father, brother, and fiancé, and a life that never got to happen. His fiancé said, "We were both young, full of plans, full of love, and full of hope, full of the life we would live together. All of that was taken away on the night Brian's life was ended." Jacqueline Carter, Brian's oldest sister, said, "The loss of Brian has haunted our family for the past 41 years, leaving deep pain that echoes through our lives." Jessica Poley, Brian's daughter, said, "While you lived your life freely for years, we lived with the emptiness you created. We carried the weight of what you did." On November 5, 2025, he said he was guilty, but not to first-degree murder, instead to 2 counts of manslaughter. One count was for the 1984 case with Brian, and the second count was for a different 1993 case. He was already in jail for the 1993 case when he was charged with Brian's case. Lewis killed 46-year-old William Vanny in William's office at 2 Sterling Square in South Boston. Lewis worked for William at the Boston Housing Authority Pest Control Unit. William went to his office on April 16, 1993, and his body was found the next day. He had been beaten, stabbed, and shot. Lewis was mad at William because he made Lewis come back to work after a long excused break. This change in charges happened because of the legal deal they made and the evidence they had. With Lewis's guilty plea, the 1984 cold case with Brian was officially closed. Lewis was sentenced to 2 15-year prison sentences to happen at the same time at the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. The police said that the resolution brought the family closer to a feeling of justice and closure after decades of questions with no answers. Attorney General Formella said, "This resolution shows the determination of detectives who refuse to let time stand in the way of justice." Nearly 40 years after Brian Watson was killed, his family can finally have some peace. We are deeply grateful to our partners in Massachusetts and New Hampshire who never stopped working toward this outcome. Even though the case had taken many years to get to this point, the final outcome gave some resolution to the people connected to the investigation. In October 2016, an 18-year-old man left his Cotati, California home, but didn't come back. The case, marked by not giving up and community support, showed how a young man's life was cut short by someone he once knew, leaving behind questions of betrayal and a community forever hurt by the loss. In September 1997 in Albany, New York, something was found. What looked like thrown-away garbage held something way more terrible. Inside was the body of a newborn baby, a discovery that immediately started one of the area's most scary investigations. On the morning of September 7, 1997, workers taking care of the grounds at Washington Park in Albany, New York, made a scary discovery. While digging an irrigation line near a flower bed close to the park's Moses Monument, one of the city park workers noticed a blue pillowcase or laundry bag that didn't look right. The bag was partly burned at one end, and a bunch of used wooden matches were on top of it, which right away made people wonder what was in it. At first thinking it might just be harmless trash, a worker used a shovel to gently poke the bag. To his shock, when the bag moved, the body of a baby fell out. The baby was lying face down on the ground in the flower bed. The unexpected discovery made the police respond right away and urgently as they rushed to figure out how the baby got there, who the parents might be, and what happened around its death. The detectives quickly saw that the baby's umbilical cord was still attached, showing that the baby had been born very recently. The partly burned wrapping around the baby, along with burn marks on the back, head, and neck, suggested someone had tried to burn either the body or the wrapping, maybe trying to destroy evidence. The scene pointed to a scary and on-purpose act rather than something natural or accidental. Medical examiners confirmed that the baby had been born alive and looked healthy at birth. They guessed that the baby was probably less than 12 hours old when it died. There were no visible signs of outside injuries or sickness, making the police conclude that suffocation or smothering rather than natural causes was probably how the baby lost their life. In the days that followed, the Albany police officers and detectives did a ton of investigating. They walked around the neighborhood, asked the public for tips, and carefully looked through trash cans for possible evidence. Also, they contacted schools, colleges, hospitals, and other places to see if any pregnant women had recently gotten treatment, gone missing, or seemed suspicious in any way. But these efforts at first didn't produce many clues. Despite the intense investigation, days turned into months with little progress. Who the baby was and what happened around his death stayed unknown, leaving the case unsolved. Eventually, the baby was buried under a headstone in Washington Park, given the name Moses Washington, a sad reminder of the tragedy and the unanswered questions around it. After more than 20 years, the baby Moses investigation took a big turn in the fall of 2020. During a time when COVID-19 disruptions kept many New Yorkers at home, and the detectives started looking at old dormant cases again, improvements in DNA technology gave new hope, making the police re-examine preserved evidence that had never given results in the 1990s. By 2022, forensic specialists succeeded in getting a usable DNA profile from the materials collected decades earlier. In August 2022, an analysis done by the FBI found the first major breakthrough in the case. The baby's DNA was connected to a relative found in a genetic database, though it wasn't clear whether that relative's information had gotten into the system through a criminal process or through a genealogy service later shared with law enforcement. No matter where it came from, the match finally gave the detectives a real direction after years of uncertainty. Following this clue, the police focused on a family with ties to Roxbury, a rural area in Delaware County, located about 70 miles from Albany. The detectives cross-checked multiple databases looking for possible connections, focusing specifically on women who would have been able to give birth in 1997 and who might have been present in the Albany area. Their attention quickly narrowed to Carrie S. Mazzucca, a 52-year-old woman from Guilderland who was divorced and had 2 children. Mazzucca, born in 1972, spent her early years in Roxbury, a small town in Delaware County, New York. During her teen years, Mazzucca attended high school in Delaware County. After finishing high school, Mazzucca continued her education at SUNY Delhi. By the mid-1990s, Mazzucca made a big change when she moved to the Albany area. At some point when she was an adult, Mazzucca married and later went through a divorce. Through that relationship, she became a mother of 2 children. To make sure they were right about their suspicions, the detectives collected thrown-away items from outside Mazzucca's house and tested them for DNA comparison. The results matched the biological profile of the baby found in Washington Park, identifying her as the child's mother. With this confirmation, the police arrested Mazzucca in September 2024, bringing an end to 27 years of unanswered questions around the case. During a police questioning, Mazzucca calmly confessed to suffocating her newborn son right after birth and trying to burn the body. The biological father was also identified and questioned, but he had no idea about the pregnancy and was cleared of any wrongdoing. In February 2025, Mazzucca entered a guilty plea. At the time of the baby's death, she had been 25 years old, and her conviction included a charge at the same time related to messing with evidence. During her sentencing on April 18, 2025 in Albany County Court, she said she was sorry, admitting how serious what she had done was and saying that she lived with lasting regret. She also described herself as having otherwise lived responsibly and asked the court to consider going easy on her. She said, "I am sorry. I did a horrible, unimaginable thing and I live with remorse and regret. I am a great mom. I have lived a law-abiding life and I do deserve a lengthy sentence. I just hope you use some discretion and go to the lower end." Mazzucca and her defense lawyer, Andrew Safranco, were asking for the judge to set a reduced sentence between 22 to 25 years. Safranco said, "Did she commit a terrible act? Absolutely. Does she deserve to be punished? 1000%. But there is no question that she has an otherwise zero criminal history and lived a law-abiding life." Deputy Chief Albany County Assistant District Attorney Jessica Blaine Lewis argued that Mazzucca is already facing a reduced sentence, and while she has admitted to ending the life of the baby, she takes little to no responsibility. Mazzucca told the detectives that she didn't have another choice. She says she didn't know that she was pregnant at the time. She was then sentenced to 25 years in state prison. A detective involved in the long investigation thought about the outcome, noting that cases like these never truly fade for those who work on them. Police Chief Brendan Cox said, "While this is special because a child was involved, because a baby was involved, there is no case that we forget. We talk about cold cases. It is not cold cases. It is the fact that any case to us is real. It is alive, and we try to carry on and make sure that we bring justice to victims, that we keep those cases alive, that we want closure for people." Mazuka's sentence will be followed by 5 years of after-release supervision. In September 1984, a motorist traveling along Interstate 93 in New Hampshire made a discovery that would reopen a mystery. For years, the investigation stalled until a witness came forward decades later. Kirk Ryan Kimberly was born in Santa Rosa in 1998, a child who quickly became the center of his parents' world. At 18 years old, Kirk was living in Cotati, California. He had recently reached a big moment that marked the beginning of his journey into being an adult, his graduation from Rancho Codate High School in 2016. Outside of school and family life, Kirk found passion in sports and activities that needed both skill and discipline. He practiced jiu-jitsu. Kirk's adventurous spirit went beyond martial arts. He was a big fan of dirt bike riding and racing, often spending weekends camping and riding with his family. Another part of Kirk's adventurous life came from the water. With his mother being a scuba instructor, Kirk developed a passion for scuba diving. His next step was to begin working at a machine shop in Rohnert Park. What he didn't know was that while he was planning for tomorrow, a danger waited for him that would change everything. On October 17, 2016, Kirk left his home in Cotati riding his white Cannondale mountain bike. His plan was simple. He was on his way to meet a friend. It was a normal day, and nothing about him leaving suggested what was about to happen. But when Kirk didn't come home that evening, his absence quickly became something his family was deeply worried about. 2 days later, with no word from Kirk, his father filed a missing persons report. The waiting and not knowing weighed heavily on the family. While the police started their work to trace where he was, the detectives tried to uncover where Kirk had gone and what had happened to him in those missing hours. The questions around his disappearance only grew as each day passed without answers. The police pressed forward with their investigation, following every possible clue. Search efforts were carried out with determination as law enforcement worked to piece together Kirk's last known movements. His family and friends held on to hope during those weeks, hanging on to the possibility that he might still be found safe. But as time moved on, the silence became more scary. The following month, on November 2nd, a landscaper working at Sonoma State University made a chilling discovery. While removing brush about 200 yards from a campus parking lot, he came across Kirk's body. The site was a wooded area known as the Badlands, located west of the Green Music Center. Even though Kirk had no ties to the university, his life ended there in a shallow grave hidden away from sight. The location itself raised troubling questions for the detectives. The autopsy done by a forensic pathologist showed that Kirk had died from multiple stab wounds. The brutal way he died left no doubt that he had been the victim of a violent crime. For his loved ones, the findings confirmed their worst fears. And for the detectives, the task ahead became even more urgent, uncovering who was responsible and why Kirk's life had been taken. The case didn't fade away, though answers were slow to come. For several years, it stayed active yet unsolved. The police continued their pursuit of justice, reminding the public that the case was not cold. As the police continued their investigation, they figured out early on that Kirk's death was not the result of a random act of violence. Instead, the crime was considered targeted. With this understanding, the detectives cast a wide net in the search for answers, interviewing over 100 people during the first stages of the investigation. Each interview was an attempt to uncover the truth and identify those connected to the crime. The community, grieving alongside Kirk's family, looked for ways to support the search for justice. Together, they raised a reward exceeding $12,500, meant to encourage anyone with information to come forward. This group effort showed the determination of both loved ones and neighbors to find closure and hold the person responsible accountable. From the beginning, the detectives had focused on Daniel Castillo, a former high school classmate of Kirk's. Castillo quickly emerged as a main suspect after the detectives got cell phone GPS data. The data placed him at the Sonoma State University campus on October 17, 2016, at the exact time Kirk's life was ended. This crucial piece of evidence guided the direction of the case, making suspicions against him stronger. On February 28, 2020, Castillo, then 20 years old, was arrested in connection to the case. At the time, he was being transferred from a youth facility, which let the police move forward with the arrest. The GPS records placing him directly at the crime scene served as the foundation of the charges against him. After years of waiting, the detectives and Kirk's family finally saw movement toward justice. Castillo was initially brought to trial, but it was during a retrial in February 2025 that he was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder. The mistrial was due to Serological Research Institute, a Richmond-based lab that had been found to have flawed DNA analysis that affected hundreds of cases statewide. The conviction came nearly 9 years after Kirk's death, marking a significant moment in a case that had stayed unsolved for so long. The verdict brought answers, though it could never erase the pain of the loss. Kirk's parents, Kelly and Jennifer, sat in the courtroom surrounded by friends and family as the verdict was read before Judge Vernon Nakahara in Sonoma County Superior Court. Kelly held his wife's hands and shut his eyes as the decision was announced. In that moment, he said his mind was on his wife and the toll the case had taken on their lives. He said, "We have had our whole life on hold for 8 years. This crime literally caused me to have open heart surgery." In June 2025, Castillo was formally sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This decision ensured he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Despite their relief at the verdict, Kelly said that he and his wife empathize with Castillo's family and understand they too have suffered a loss. He said, "We are certainly not happy, but we are relieved." Reflecting on the long investigation, Sonoma County Sheriff's authorities commented, "For the past 3 years, violent crime detectives have been conducting follow-up interviews and reviewing physical and forensic evidence. Their words showed the persistence that had carried the case forward and ultimately delivered justice for Kirk Kimberly."